Hello everybody, I'm Pete Cook. This is the Hydrogen to Human series. A series of 10 videos which explains how hydrogen and nothing else can self-assemble into human beings. Video 1, we looked at a big problem. The big problem that if I try and describe reality just using physics, I cannot. If I look at the solar system, it has parts which are chaotic. Now, physics is by definition predictable, so there's contradiction. It's got parts which are self-organizing, and it's got parts which are predictable. So I need a description of reality that allows all that to happen. That's at the gravitational scale. At the atomic scale, I've got the same problem. Molecules do not just fall together and make all those beautiful shapes that we see in molecules by luck. As Brian Cox says, we never expect in the desert the wind just to blow and assemble a sandcastle. It's never going to happen using the laws of physics. So why does it happen? Why does the solar system self-organize into a very accurate clock? Why do molecules self-organize into these beautiful patterns and then dynamically self-organize into living organisms? Another state of matter that does happen. And if we just use the laws of physics, we don't get self-organization. Like this pile of magnets here, they don't self-organize into anything which I recognize as something which is not just complete disorder or randomness. So that was the problem in video 1. Video 2, we solved the problem by showing that the universe is not just obeying the laws of physics. It also obeys the laws of mathematics, and even at the very basic level of just an electron and a proton, the aspects of positive and negative are not physical aspects at all. They're just pure mathematics. But if they're not positive and negative, they don't have the properties of attract and repel. So that solved the problem. I can't see the mathematics inside the physics. And when I look at the elements, no matter how much I look at the physics, so let's have a look, just elements. I keep staring at the elements and I cannot say how the elements, the physics, change into DNA. So that's the big problem. What I see is this. If I just try and use these laws, I can't answer the problem. But if I use the laws of our mathematics, and especially this mathematics, this is what we're going to look at today. Non-linear mathematics. Video 3, we looked at very simple self-assembly from something here which is more simple. The first components in the universe which self-assemble into something more complex are protons and neutrons. They assemble from quarks. Quarks, very, very simple, but what we saw is that nothing in physics breaks down into individual components. It breaks down into conjugate pairs, little parts which are all two manifestations of the same thing. Quarks coming up and down, strange and charmed, top and bottom. And they also come in 3 different colour forces. So I've got a relationship between 2s and 3s that build a proton, that build a neutron. And I use the same pattern again. Neutron, proton and electron. That builds one new component when I get to 3. So that's a very, very special mathematical relationship Based on the first two prime numbers, I'm going from something very simple here to something more complex here. And in video 2, we showed that we build stars and elements using relativity. The conjugate pairs are in a relationship that's interdependent. 3 parts of relativity, not just general relativity, which is simply a relationship between matter, which has mass, and space. 2 parts of energy, units of energy, and fields of energy. It's the relationship between them which causes stars and planets to form. But if I don't have atomic forces to act against gravity, the star doesn't stay up. It collapses straight away into a black hole. So it's a relationship between what happens at the gravitational level, what happens at the atomic level, which causes stars to form. Specifically, the strong and weak nuclear force here, which is releasing that energy that holds the star up. And it's simply the electromagnetic force, the repulsion of what's happening here. And I've got to have those electrons held in place by the strong and weak nuclear force. It's the repulsion of atoms that holds planets up. So I go from a very, very simple system here, system of gravitational forces, atomic forces, and energy holding that star up. That's a simple system. Atomic nuclei is a simple system, a relationship between protons, which have the strong nuclear force, neutrons, which have the strong nuclear force, and the electromagnetic force, which stops atomic nuclei getting too big. 3 different relationships: gravity, matter, and space. The strong and weak nuclear force, asymmetrical forces, and that's relationship between fermions and bosons. And fermions and bosons, the mathematical representation of them is that one is symmetrical and one is asymmetrical. Odd and even numbers. Space and matter, real and imaginary numbers, commensurable. Commensurable parts, not commensurable parts. Space and matter are not commensurable. Real and imaginary numbers are not commensurable. There are no units to count with in imaginary numbers, but they act against each other. They change each other's behavior. And electromagnetism, symmetrical numbers, symmetrical forces. 3 forces built from pairs, all relativity. The principle of general relativity is I bifurcate into 2 parts of energy, and whatever happens here, the space is distorted by the matter. The matter is distorted into spheres by the space. So now I've got forces coming in 3 different pairs. They build the simple parts of reality. I go from just simplicities here. A black hole is a simple relationship. It is not a single entity. It cannot be, otherwise it doesn't form. Then I get my simple relationships here. Magnetic force, just 2 poles, north and south. Then over here, this is video 4, where we jump into the 3rd part of reality, the complex part of reality. So here I've got physics, Newtonian physics, linear, predictable physics. This is a pendulum, and then I add on to physics another part of reality, and the laws of this reality are purely mathematical laws that add on to physics, that explain at the atomic level why we see complex molecules and the dynamic systems of life. At the solar system, the gravitational level, I see complex self-organizing systems, chaotic parts and predictable parts. That's what I see. That's what I'm saying. That's the answer. Now, we've had this mathematics for 40 years, well, in detail since we had the computer, but Poincaré shows that this mathematics gives you an explanation of what you see in the solar system. Newton does the predictable, the easy, just here. Two parts of physics. Everything here comes in twos. Here it comes in threes or more. Just north and south, magnetic parts. But electrical fields are complex. Gravitational fields, very simply. Magnetic fields come in two parts. Electrical fields are complex. Electromagnetic parts. Electro, +1, 0 and -1. I can't build nuclei without my 0. So if I add on to physics, non-linear dynamics, purely mathematical rules, I get a description of reality which is the same as I observe. That's it. Now he states it in here. He states that that is the truth. Let's see what he says. Now he's looking at systems, and the first three systems he looks at in the book, one is a population of insects. The other is an electrical circuit, and the third is just turbulence in a fluid. Three completely different systems. The physical parts don't matter. They all share the same universal complex behavior, which is mathematical. He says, if we look at the features that are common to all successful models of non-linear, unpredictable behavior, we find the common features are not the physical features of the system. Not the physical. The behavior has changed. This will be disturbing to many scientists. We have to cast off the blinders that many 20th century physicists have worn. This is Robert C. Hilborn. This is the first really good book on nonlinear dynamics and chaos. Nonlinear dynamics can be self-organizing or chaotic. Again, I get a pair. I get a pair, two parts of physics, atomic and gravitational. Atomic always comes in, more complex always comes in two parts. So here I've got gravity, very, very simple. But here I get quarks and leptons, two different kinds of quarks, two different kinds of leptons. And quarks and leptons are two manifestations of the same thing. When a proton changes into a neutron, a lepton, two leptons, a neutrino and an electron come out, but they're not inside there in the first place. It's what happens, it changes one quark into another. So the difference between the neutrino and the electron is the difference between an up quark and a down quark. RNA and DNA, viruses, atomic nuclei, music which comes in these partners. Music, simple. That's why animals use it as language. That's why we respond to music. It's a simple form of communication that comes in pairs. Think about it. Major and minor, harmony and rhythm. And language built from three parts: signs, meaning, and code. So here's my code for life. Life over here. Viruses over here. And over here the prion. Self-replicating proteins, not using code. Everything going from the most simple relationship to here, all my dualities. And the more you look at this, the more you see this, over into one new state of being. Life, a complex state of matter that is not explained by the simple laws of physics. Now this is beginning to make sense. Now I can say what a chaotic pendulum is. If I have three equal parts, if I have three equal sized planets spinning around each other, Their behavior is chaotic. Now, if I look at a chaotic pendulum, these are physical parts. They're still obeying the laws of physics. I've got atomic physics holding it together. I've got classical physics making them behave as levers. I've got gravitational physics pulling them down. But the behavior of a chaotic pendulum is completely chaotic. It is not obeying the predictable Newtonian laws of physics. That's what Newton brought in. Einstein brings in a simple relationship that shows how the Earth can pull the Moon over with a non-physical separation between them. And we saw in part 2 that classical physics, any physical object, is exactly the same, but the scale at which I observe it means I think that is made from little units of substance. There are no little units of substance that build substance. They're built of units of energy, which over a distance, space, what happens in the space holds them together and holds them apart. It builds structure. So structure, classical mechanics, is the same principle as general relativity. So classical mechanics now is another part of general relativity. I get 3 different kinds of relationships. Gravity, gravitational relationships, strong and weak relationships, electromagnetic relationships, all building in order from simple to complex. So here, Robert C. Hilborn's answer, it answers Brian Greene's question, what's the hidden reality? Now he's still looking in physics for the answer. And because when you look inside the physical components, the stars and planets of the solar system, you can't find what's organizing that solar system. When I look in molecules, the elements, I can't find what's organizing those molecules into these beautiful patterns that we call group mathematics. I can't find what's organizing the atoms into the components of a cell. If I look down inside something like a chloroplast, it's like a city, and I need feedback loops of information. This is a feedback loop. The gravitational part pulling together the atomic parts, which release energy and push that star out. It's a feedback loop. So that's a system. That's what a system is. Here it's a static system. But when I get dynamic systems feeding back, and what we see here is that photosynthesis and respiration are mirror images of each other, and the plant does both. It feeds back. Now we've been looking at that for a long, long time. We've been looking at all the mathematics in nature for thousands of years. We used to think the universe was all mathematical, but then along comes Newton and changes our viewpoint. It says it's physics, and we forget about the mathematics. Even though we can see it, we still keep looking in the physics book to try and explain reality. We cannot, never will be able to do it. As Brian Cox says, we wouldn't expect the desert just to gather itself together, build a sandcastle. It's never going to happen. So let's look at reality in a whole new way. 3 pairs of forces. Not the 4 forces, that's been thrown us. Everything comes in these pairs. And I get universal behavior in complexity. Pairs. It's chaotic, so I can't predict what it's going to do. It's self-organizing. I can't predict what it's going to make. And there are 2 mathematical values which govern, which the whole of this universal complex behavior. So I get this 1, 2, 3 pattern, but my ones is always a relationship. It starts as 2. And I get a relationship between 2's coming in pairs. And when I get to 3, I get a new component, a proton, made of 3 quarks. So I go back here, just use it again. And I use the same pattern again to build a neutron. And then a neutron, a proton, an atom when I add the electron. So now I can see that. I see it in numbers, 3 pairs of numbers which act against each other, odd and even, positive and negative, real, imaginary. So I now get a new diagram here. And my numbers also, I need to come in asymmetrical partnerships. Physics always comes in strong and weak. And then odd and even, well, that's the same thing, it's just asymmetry. Positive and negative is symmetry. Real and imaginary, they're not commensurable. So I now add to my real parts of numbers, strong and weak. Matter, very, very strong units of energy. Then photons, weak units of energy. Strong magnetic and electrical fields, weak gravitational fields. Then I get the strong parts of the quantum chromodynamics, the nuclear forces, which come in 3s and 2 quarks. I get 3 color forces. And then the weak parts, I need 3 bosons and 2 leptons. Now it's beginning to make sense. So I've got 3 planes, which give me 8 different parts, 8 different pairs of relationships coming in 3s. That makes sense. So I can also see it in waves. When I get waves of energy, I've got units of energy, fields of energy, and waves of energy. I get pairs, electromagnetic waves, but I also get individual waves. And an electron can behave as a wave. So there must be a wave that comes in 3, and it must go in my weak and weak part, strong and strong part, strong and strong. Strong and weak, strong and weak. It's a weak and weak part for the neutrino, which does come in triplet waves. And what I see just depends on the relationship between the waves. So that's it, a completely new picture of reality, going from simple to complex, using the laws of physics and the laws of mathematics. Now everything that we're saying, you can go and check. It's only logic. All the science stays the same, the mathematics stays the same. We just get a new description, which is either the same as we observe or it's not. So you, everybody, non-specialist, can test this for logic. Is what I am saying the same as what we see? See you next time. Bye for now.